Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. My wife joked at brunch, in front of 8 people, that she gave our marriage 6 more months, tops. It wasn't said quietly. It wasn't whispered behind a menu. It was tossed out the way she flipped her hair or checked her iPhone every 2 minutes, like the words meant nothing. Her friends laugh the way people laugh when they know the joke isn't about them. And while the noise built around me, something inside went silent. I didn't correct her. I didn't smile. I just looked at her and understood, with a clarity that felt like cold metal, that she had finally said the truth out loud. She expected me to laugh along like I usually did. She expected me to be predictable, steady, the police officer who made everyone feel safe. The husband who quietly held the weight so she could impress her clients and chase investors, including the one who'd been hovering too close lately. The man with the tailored suits and the expensive watch who kept showing up at her salon like he owned more than just shares in her ambition. She didn't see what her friends saw when they stopped laughing. One of them glanced at me, then at her, and the grin died on her face. Something in the air shifted, but my wife didn't notice. She was busy telling a story about a new collaboration she wanted and how this investor had opened doors. She said it in a tone that made it sound like our marriage was just another door she could close if it didn't fit the layout. I took a slow sip of my coffee. She was too distracted scrolling Amazon to see my expression change. I let her finish. Then I set my cup down, leaned slightly forward, and said that she was generous because I gave the marriage 6 minutes. The table went silent. Even the people at the next booth looked over. I placed my wedding ring beside her untouched Starbucks cup. Then I got up, walked past the brunch chatter, past the windows that reflected the bright line of my Toyota Camry in the sun, and stepped outside. 8 minutes later, her panic call came through. I didn't answer. I didn't go far after I stepped out of that brunch place. I stood in the parking lot long enough to feel the sun heat the roof of my car, long enough to watch her friends spill outside in clusters, whispering and scanning the street like they expected me to circle back and calm the situation the way I always had. Instead, I leaned against the sedan and let my phone vibrate inside my pocket. She called 3 times in those first minutes, then switched to messages, short ones at first, then longer, then suddenly sweet in a way she hadn't been in months. I didn't open any of them. The uniform teaches you how to hold your ground, how to stay silent until the noise burns itself out. I let the silence do the work. When I finally drove off, I didn't go home. I went to the station, even though I wasn't on shift. The building always had a different kind of quiet, the kind made of fluorescent lights and old paperwork. It grounded me. I stayed in the common room, answering nothing, watching the missed calls stack in the corner of my iPhone screen. An officer I'd known for years walked by, paused, and asked if everything was all right. I told him I was just clearing my head. He nodded in that way men nod when they sense something deeper, but know better than to ask. He left me alone. Her investor was the last thing I'd expected to think about that afternoon, but his face kept surfacing in my mind. The hand on her shoulder when she showed him a new salon design. The late-night messages she tried to angle away from me. The little jokes she made about business partners who understood her drive. She never said anything explicit, but the truth didn't need a confession. Status can be a kind of affair, the kind that stains more quietly than lipstick. By early evening, I drove to Walmart just to walk the aisles and let my mind settle. I didn't buy anything. I didn't need anything. I just needed the anonymity. Bright aisles, neutral people, nobody waiting for me to react. When I stepped back outside, she called again. This time, her voice in the voicemail wasn't confident. It cracked halfway through. I still didn't answer. I got home late, long after the streetlights had settled into their steady hum. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside, like the air had been disturbed. She wasn't there. That alone didn't surprise me. She often stayed late at the salon for meetings, but the silence felt intentional, like she was giving me space she assumed I'd use to cool off. What she didn't understand was that cooling off wasn't the direction I was headed. I wasn't burning. I was emptying. And that emptiness was where the shift was happening. I placed my keys on the counter and saw her tablet open on the kitchen table. Notifications glowed across the screen, calendar invites, social messages, reminders. One message sat open in the center of it all, a thread I wasn't meant to see. It was from the investor. He wrote about an upcoming event, something she'd asked him to keep quiet. He said she'd impressed the right people and that she should keep her husband comfortable until everything was secured. The phrasing was cold, transactional. It read like she was managing me the way she managed suppliers and brand reps, not a partner. A variable. I didn't scroll. I didn't dig. One message was enough. I shut the tablet without a sound. My iPhone buzzed again. She sent a voice message this time. Her tone was softer, almost a whisper, saying she was heading home soon and wanted to talk. She added that her friends told her she might have gone too far at brunch, and she said she hoped I wasn't taking it personally. The gap between her words and her actions hit harder than the brunch joke. She was still spinning it, still assuming she had room to negotiate. I walked into the bedroom and pulled a duffel from under the bed. I didn't pack much, just clothes, my badge, and a few essentials. I left everything else where it was. This wasn't a dramatic exit. It was a recalibration. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway and let the quiet settle one more time. No yelling, no confrontation, just a shift in gravity. I drove off, letting the sedan roll through the neighborhood without hurry. I stopped at Starbucks on the way to the station, not for the coffee but for the noise, the anonymity. She called just as I stepped inside. I let it ring. I stayed at the station that night, not because I needed backup, but because the building felt like the one place where nothing about my life was negotiable. The overnight shift was half asleep, half bored, and no one asked why I was there. I took an empty office, turned off the lights, and let the glow from the hallway settle across the floor. My iPhone lay face down on the desk, buzzing every 20 minutes. She alternated between apology and irritation, a rhythm I knew too well. I didn't open anything. Silence wasn't punishment. It was clarity. Around midnight, one of the younger officers walked by and mentioned that he'd seen my wife earlier that evening. He wasn't gossiping, just stating it the way officers do when they think it might matter. He said she was talking to that investor outside her salon, and that the man had looked comfortable. The way he said comfortable made something click. Not jealousy, recognition. That guy didn't see me as a factor. He saw me as a formality, something she'd outgrow once her plans lined up. It wasn't romance between them, it was leverage. And I finally understood my place in the equation. I stayed until dawn, long after the call stopped. When the morning shift arrived, I left quietly, driving to Walmart to pick up a few things I actually needed. A toothbrush, deodorant, a clean shirt for the day. The store felt like a reset button. Bright aisles, early shoppers, no one expecting anything from me. I took my time, letting the normalcy settle into my bones. When I got back to the car, I saw the notification banner. 14 missed calls, 6 voicemails, a series of messages asking where I was, asking if I planned to come home, asking if we could rewind and talk like adults. The shift in tone was subtle, but I could feel the panic underneath. Not fear of losing me, fear of losing control. I didn't answer. I drove to the precinct gym instead and worked out until my arms shook. Every rep felt like cutting another string that had been wrapped around me for years. By noon, she showed up at the station. But she didn't come for me. She came asking questions. And the way everyone watched her told me the balance had already changed. She walked into the station with the kind of confidence she used when entering her salon on a busy Saturday, expecting every head to turn her way. But a police precinct isn't a place where charm buys anything, and the officers at the front desk looked at her with a mix of curiosity and caution. I watched from the end of the hallway, unseen, as she tried to gather information without admitting she didn't know where her own husband had spent the night. She said she was just checking in, just making sure I was all right, just wanting to clear up a misunderstanding. The receptionist nodded politely, but the room felt different. Everyone could sense she was the one trying to regain footing, not me. I stayed behind the corner until she left. No confrontation, no eye contact, just distance. It was the first time I'd ever seen her walk out of a room without the upper hand, and I realized how little effort it had taken on my part, just silence and a change in direction. After she was gone, I went to the back office to finish writing up a report I had postponed for weeks. Work felt steady, clean, unaffected. But during a break, one of our detectives pulled me aside. He mentioned, almost casually, that the investor she'd been entertaining had been stirring some trouble in town. Nothing illegal on paper, but messy enough to make people wary. Then he said something that landed harder than anything at brunch. He said the man had been bragging about helping a business owner get ahead, calling her ambitious, strategic, willing to do what others wouldn't. It wasn't jealousy that hit me. It was the insult. The idea that he viewed my wife the same way he viewed his deals, assets, leverage, stepping stones. And she'd let him, whether she realized it or not. During lunch, I sat in my car and let the engine idle. My iPhone lit up with another message from her, this time a long one. She said she felt blindsided by how I'd walked out. She said she didn't deserve to be ignored. She said we were supposed to be a team. The words sounded rehearsed, like something she'd tell a client after a miscommunication. I drove to Starbucks, ordered nothing, and sat there long enough to understand the next step. I didn't need to confront her. I just needed to let the distance widen. By the next morning, the shift in her tone became obvious to more people than just me. I was reviewing body cam footage in the tech room when one of the admin staff mentioned, almost in passing, that my wife had stopped by again. The comment wasn't gossipy. It was observational, the way someone notes a sudden change in weather. She said my wife looked tense, distracted, the kind of restless that doesn't come from worry but from losing control of a narrative she thought she owned. Around noon, I stepped outside to clear my head. The sun hit the hood of my car, and I leaned against it, letting the warmth settle into my arms. A group of officers stood near the entrance, talking quietly. When they noticed me, their conversation shifted, and one of them gave a look that wasn't pity, wasn't judgment, more like confirmation. People had started seeing the cracks she'd worked years to hide. The real moment came when I stopped by Walmart to grab protein bars before heading back. I ran into one of her clients there, a woman who had always adored her. She recognized me instantly, then hesitated before speaking. She said she'd been at the salon earlier and overheard my wife snapping at an employee, something about needing to clean up a situation before Saturday. Then she said the investor had been there too, pacing around the back office like he owned the place. She added that the whole staff felt on edge, whispering that something wasn't right. I didn't react. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded and moved on. But the shift was undeniable. People were talking, not about me walking out, but about her unraveling. When I got back to the car, I checked my iPhone. She had sent a long message explaining that things were getting misinterpreted and that I needed to come home before rumors spread. She said she wanted us to present a united front. Her wording wasn't emotional, it was strategic. She didn't want me. She wanted stability. Optics. Damage control. I locked the screen without replying. That afternoon, I passed by her salon on the way back to the station. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just watched from inside the sedan as she stepped outside, scanning the street like she expected me to drive up and fix everything. But I wasn't stepping into that role again. Not now. Not ever. I spent the next few days moving on a different frequency than the one she was used to. Longer shifts, extra cases, early mornings at the precinct gym. I kept my iPhone on silent, letting her messages pile up until the banner itself felt tired. She tried every tone she knew, from soft concern to clipped frustration. She said she needed to see me. She said things were getting complicated at the salon. She said the investor was misreading boundaries and that people were twisting things. Her words came fast, panicked, layered with the kind of urgency that appears only when someone realizes the social ground beneath them is slipping. I didn't answer. I didn't block her either. I let the distance grow in a clean, steady line. One night, after a 14-hour shift, I drove to Walmart to grab something quick for dinner. I wasn't hungry, but walking the aisles became part of the quiet I needed. As I passed the refrigerated section, I heard my name. It was one of her employees, a girl barely out of college who worked the front desk at the salon. She said she didn't want to get involved, but she looked shaken. She said the investor had shown up again, unannounced, and that he'd argued with my wife behind the closed office door. She said the staff pretended not to hear, but the walls were thin. She added that my wife cried afterward, not angry tears, confused ones, the kind that come when a plan starts to collapse from the wrong end. I thanked her, nothing more. She seemed relieved I wasn't angry. People could sense the shift in me, the stillness. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something colder and more deliberate. After I checked out, I sat in the car for a long minute, watching the glow of the parking lot reflect on the hood of the sedan. My iPhone buzzed again. Another message from my wife, longer than the others. She said she missed me. She said things were falling apart. She said she didn't know who to trust. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat. I didn't open it. When I got back to the precinct, one of my supervisors pulled me aside. He said the investor had filed a complaint earlier that day, not against the salon, against me. The complaint wasn't serious on paper, but it was strategic. The investor claimed he felt uncomfortable seeing my patrol car near the salon earlier in the week, and he suggested I might be monitoring private business matters. The wording was careful, the kind used by people who know how to weaponize suggestion without crossing into outright accusation. My supervisor didn't buy it, but protocol required a conversation. He asked if anything personal was going on, and I told him the truth in the simplest possible way. My wife and I were taking some space. He didn't push. He just reminded me to keep everything clean, which I'd already been doing long before the investor ever sensed a shift. After the meeting, I walked to the break room and let the cold fluorescent light settle over me. The investor wasn't coming after me because he felt threatened physically. He felt threatened socially. He'd built his influence on perception, and my silence, my distance from her, was dismantling that perception faster than any argument could. He needed her steady. He needed her focused. Instead, she was unraveling, and he knew exactly why. That evening, I parked the sedan behind the precinct and sat there with the engine off, letting the dusk settle around the windshield. My iPhone buzzed again, this time with a missed call from one of her closest friends, a woman who never liked me much because I didn't fit the polished circle she admired. Her voicemail surprised me. She said my wife wasn't herself. She said the salon felt tense. She said the investor had started acting possessive in ways that made the staff uncomfortable. None of it sounded rehearsed. It sounded like people finally seeing the truth without the filter my wife always put over her life. I didn't call back. I didn't correct anything. I didn't clarify my side. Silence was doing the work for me. When my shift ended, I drove to Starbucks, bought nothing, and sat by the window. Across the street, cars blurred by in streaks of red and white. I realized something important there, in the quiet. I wasn't chasing distance anymore. I was living in it. Her messages shifted again as I sat there. She said she needed to see me immediately. She said the investor had crossed a line. She said she felt unsafe. And for the first time since brunch, I felt something close to anger, not at her, but at the way she'd built her world out of people who used her more skillfully than she used anyone else. I locked the screen and stood up. I still didn't go to her. I didn't go to her, but life has a way of forcing intersections when pressure builds in too many directions at once. 2 days after her message about feeling unsafe, I was assigned to a community patrol near the shopping district. It wasn't unusual, just routine coverage, but as I turned onto the main street, I saw a small crowd gathered outside her salon. At first, I thought it was just weekend traffic, but then I recognized the stiff posture of people pretending not to stare. That kind of tension is unmistakable. I parked the sedan at the far end of the block, stepped out, and walked toward the storefront without urgency, without signaling anything. I wasn't there for her. I was on duty. Still, the closer I got, the clearer the scene became. Her staff stood in a tight cluster near the entrance, whispering. A few clients waited on the sidewalk, uncomfortable, ready to leave even if they had appointments. And inside, through the glass, I saw the investor pacing the lobby like he owned the place. His suit jacket hung off one shoulder, his gestures sharp, irritated, territorial. My wife stood near the reception desk, face pale, arms crossed not in confidence, but in self-defense. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically but socially, as if the world she'd built stopped obeying her. When she saw me through the glass, something broke in her expression. It wasn't relief. It was recognition. She finally understood what it meant to be on the other side of distance. I stepped inside because it was my job, not because she wanted me there. The room went quiet. The investor stopped pacing and straightened like he'd been caught doing something he wasn't proud of. He said he was just resolving a misunderstanding. He said the staff overreacted. He said my presence wasn't necessary. His voice shook on that last part. I kept it professional. I asked if there was a disturbance. No emotion. No familiarity. Just the tone I used with strangers. He backed down immediately, murmuring something about scheduling issues and leaving through the side door without looking back. When he was gone, the staff exhaled all at once. My wife stepped toward me as if she expected a private conversation. some quiet reconciliation. But I didn't move. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't ask what happened. I acknowledged the staff, wrote a brief incident note, and walked out. Behind me, she whispered my name like a question she no longer knew how to ask. I didn't turn around. She followed me out of the salon that day, but only as far as the sidewalk. I heard the door close behind me, then nothing but the kind of silence that forms when someone finally understands the distance is real. I didn't look back. I walked to the far end of the block, got into the sedan, and sat there long enough for the noise inside me to drain out. My iPhone buzzed on the passenger seat. She didn't call this time. She just sent a message saying she needed 5 minutes of my time. Just 5. She said she didn't want to talk about the investor or the salon. She only wanted me to hear her. Her words carried something I hadn't heard from her in years. Humility, with no calculation beneath it. I didn't respond right away. I drove to Starbucks instead and sat in the parking lot watching people come and go. Normal people. People whose marriages weren't negotiations, whose ambitions didn't require someone else being small. I thought about the brunch table, the laughter, the ring sitting beside her untouched drink. I thought about how easily she'd gambled our marriage on the assumption that I'd always come back. When I finally returned to the house that evening, I didn't enter dramatically. I unlocked the door the way I always had, walked in, and felt that same unfamiliar air I'd felt the night I packed the duffel. She was sitting at the kitchen table, hands clasped tightly, shoulders lowered in a way that made her look younger and older at the same time. She didn't jump up. She didn't cry. She just said she'd messed up. She said she'd let herself believe that the world she built was more stable than the man who'd stood beside her all these years. She said the investor was gone, the staff was scared, and she finally understood what she'd risked for attention that meant nothing. I sat across from her. No anger, no satisfaction, just a steady quiet she couldn't interpret. She asked if there was anything left to save. I told her something simple, something true. Respect doesn't survive jokes made for applause. She asked if I was leaving for good. I stood, walked to the doorway, and paused. I said I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't valued. Then I told her that whatever came next would only exist if it was built on equal ground. I left the house again that night. But this time, she knew the door wouldn't open unless she rebuilt herself first. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.